I call the Township of Aleppo workshop meeting of December 12th, 2022 to order at 7 p.m. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
President Jones.
Present.
Commissioner Richard.
Present.
Commissioner Haluka.
Present.
Manager Patterson. Here.
This meeting, as all others, will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. Do I hear a motion to approve the November legislative meeting minutes?
I motion to approve November 22nd, 22 legislative meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
There is.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Executive session. I've decided we should.
Yes? Okay.
Good choice.
I think that, so we're gonna turn this off.
All right.
There was an executive session held, about 5 minutes ago, and during that executive session, matters involving personnel were discussed, and we are now back in our public session.
Thank you. The first item on old business is the 2023 budget ordinance, and we have a change being suggested for the existing draft budget. Commissioner Haluka,
I make a motion that we approve giving bonuses of $1,000 to each of our Aleppo Township employees as to stave off inflationary and as a thank you for a job well done.
and it's a one-time cash bonus. Is there a second?
I do have a second. I just want to add that I think it's really important for staff retention, during this time and rewarding your really stellar employees for hard work.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So, Manager Patterson, would you make that adjustment to the budget?
I will, yes, I can do that. Thank you.
Redgate Road, as suggested, PennDOT did a traffic study and Manager Patterson has the results.
PennDOT wrote us a letter saying, this is a follow-up to your letter of September 20th requesting a truck restriction study on State Road 4028, Redgate Road, River Road, in the Township of Aleppo in the Borough of Hayesville, Allegheny County. The department has conducted an engineering and traffic study to determine if a truck restriction on Redgate within the municipal boundaries of Aleppo and the Borough of Hayesville meets the requirements to do so. The results of the study show that State Road 4028 warrants a restriction of trucks over 40 feet in length. The department will implement the truck restriction and install the appropriate signs as soon as scheduling permits. The department recommends that the Township of Aleppo remove the non-standard no-through truck traffic sign at the intersection of Redgate and Merriman Road. If the sign is not removed by the township, the department will remove it. If we have any further questions, we have a contact person, a traffic engineer to contact. So we removed our sign from that intersection, and I actually don't know, I didn't check and see if they put their new restriction up.
Well, we did see a tractor trailer turn around the other day.
We were sitting in here and saw one bypass here and go past, and we're like, well, and then we just saw them slowly back down past the windows, so.
And when I first read that, I thought 40 feet? 40 feet's still pretty big for that bridge.
That's why I just looked at you like that.
I know, but
It is.
apparently that's what PennDOT believes, and
I mean, 40 feet's a full trailer, am I correct?
no.
A
I think
full,
it's
like a full, I think
52.
the full, like the whole tractor trailer thing is 53, I think, the cabinet
Yeah.
thing. So
Okay,
this
so
is
what would
probably
be
like-
40?
I think there are smaller tractor trailers that have like a shorter, box part of the back. I've seen some that aren't all the whole 18-wheeler length.
Have you heard anything from Hayesville?
I have not.
Because isn't the primary problem in Hayesville?
It was, if you starts on Redgate, and then you cross the bridge and you're in Hayesville, and then
And then they
Hayesville,
tip
where they
over in
fell over.
Hayesville.
Yeah,
So would you please communicate with them, and if they're unhappy about this, we can talk to them about it.
sure.
40 feet's still a pretty big truck to go
That's
across
a big
that
truck.
bridge.
Yeah, it is.
And that,
I
both
agree.
of those trucks, when they went over in Hayesville.
But I'm sure that PennDOT has the expertise. Okay, and then, has there been any further discussion with Ohio Township about monitoring speed, et cetera, on Redgate?
Just to let them know that we have budgeted allocated some money in 2023 for patrols in various spots around the township, but that we will be, purchasing dedicated blocks of time, of officer time for traffic.
And the schedule will be according to what Ohio Township thinks is the most effective.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion on Redgate? We have a draft ordinance prohibiting the feeding of deer. It's in your packet. Harlan, would you like to discuss this?
Yeah, we talked about this in our last meeting, and there are a number of model ordinances that have been drafted by different municipalities all of whom struggle with the same problem that we struggle with, which is, the deer. And the Game Commission, I found out, has actually done some of its own work on the deer, not surprisingly. And they actually, in their literature, strongly recommend against feeding of deer. And they recite a number of health problems, safety problems with traffic, the tick-borne illnesses that go along with the deer, and other illnesses. So what I did was I went in 2 or 3 of the different ordinances, and I tried to pull what I thought would be the best provisions for your particular situation. And I can, if you want, I can tell you exactly what those are, but I know there was some concern about the enforcement and how we would enforce the ordinance. And what I opted for was a pretty simple provision that treats the enforcement of this ordinance the way it would any other township ordinance. So there's nothing, so for the concern over, how would we handle an actual complaint, we would handle it the same way we would any other ordinance violation. Meaning that your code enforcement officer, Jeff Frazier, would initially make some assessment of that complaint, and usually what we do is we send Jeff out on an initial call and to approach the resident in a nice way, in a neighborly way, and ask them to cease and desist from the violative conduct. If that doesn't work, that's usually followed up with a letter and a reminder, and if that doesn't work, in most cases we send out an official notice of violation, and then we get into magistrate hearings and fines. So there were some ordinances which treated the enforcement mechanism differently, but I think that they're just confusing, and I think they really don't, I don't see the point in differentiating this type of ordinance violation from any other standard violation. Go ahead.
Someone who had watched our prior meeting spoke to me today, actually at another function that I was at. And the question is, what defines feeding deer? And here's why I say this. Her definition would include, and she cited a neighborhood, another HOA that's not here, that's a friend of hers, who feed birds.
Right.
And they used their no deer ordinance to enforce bird feeders. And that was my concern, is what, if the deer are eating my neighbor's bird feeder, can I then, send our code enforcement officer out to, kick my neighbor for feeding deer when she's actually trying to feed, robins or whatever she's trying to feed. And so, I guess I see a real broad definition of what it means to feed deer. Swiftly Confectionery leaves off my produce once a week. If a deer comes up and eats my produce, I don't think I'm feeding deer. But actually, this person interpreted bird feeders as feeding deer. Now, that wouldn't be my interpretation, but what that put in my head is a red flag, that we need a definition of, because I don't want this to become a vengeful, I never liked the fact that my neighbor feeds birds.
How do you define primary purpose?
Okay, so we define, this ordinance anyway, defines it as the prohibition includes but is not limited to disbursement of food on the ground at a feeding station, a feeding device, or a container in any form, providing salt or mineral lick block, or any other means which serves to provide feed or results in the attraction of any deer in the township.
So that would include a bird feeder.
Well, wait, this prohibition shall not include live vegetation, such as ornamental landscaping, flowers, trees, vines, or vegetable gardens. This prohibition shall also not apply to licensed veterinarians, animal control officers, state or county game officials who in the course of their duties have deer in their custody or management. So it could be interpreted, but I think,
I think we
I
need
think
to
the-
define that.
well,
Is there something that can say prohibiting as a primary action the feeding
Like
of deer?
intentional feeding of deer.
so every criminal ordinance, every ordinance with a criminal, potential criminal penalty associated with, requires an intent. And so,
Right.
this person would have to actually be intentionally a violator would have to be intentionally using the bird feeder to provide food for the deer.
All I'm trying to avoid is Gwen getting, phone calls that, my neighbor has that bird feeder up again this year, and every winter deer come in my yard and poop there because their bird feeder's up in the front yard.
So after the meeting, I received a picture from a resident showing another person in the township with a 5-gallon bucket,
That's feeding the deer.
feeding the deer. The deer were
Absolutely.
walking right up and they were just having a little transaction. So I
My-
think that's where we would focus.
Sorry,
in
my
this kind of
suggestion would
enforcement.
be that, again, like anything else, the key to real successful enforcement efforts is really the efforts of the enforcement officer. And I think if Gwen says to Jeff, hey, if there's a bird feeder in the yard, that's not a violation. You don't wanna violate people just because they own bird, just like you don't wanna violate them just because they, have a garden.
Okay, that's my question, is that what we're saying? That we're not gonna enforce this ordinance against people that are feeding the birds in their yard?
Bird feeder with bird feed in it.
I
If you have a bird feeder with,
Apples in it or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's primary intent.
Mhm.
So there is interpretation here, and we're kind of establishing if some bird feed gets thrown out of your bird feeder by the blue jays, and a deer comes 4 hours later and eats 2 seed, that isn't what we're talking about. And the other thing is, not to be too
I just
facetious.
promised that I would define that for this
Good.
person that had this discussion.
We all feed the deer by planting shrubs. We all feed the deer
By
by planting
landscaping.
grass.
Yes.
The deer are not going to go away because we don't feed them. But you're correct, the Game Commission believes that because the digestive tract of a deer changes in the winter to adjust, it really harms them. So this is for the protection of the deer, and then it's also to prevent obvious 5-gallon jugs of bird feeder trying to make friends of the deer. And I think you can correct me, the manager then and our code enforcement officer has an interpretive aspect to this. And it's pretty clear that we don't want people to be cited for accidentally having bird feed fall out of the bird feeder.
So we would not be prohibiting bird
No,
feeders with bird seed through the winter, even if the deer like to eat the bird seed out of the bird feeder?
Cause squirrels really eat it, just to be
As
clear.
Patty pointed out,
raccoons.
unless somebody is using the bird feeder as the
Yes.
vehicle for
Yes,
feeding the
I've
deer.
seen people with a bird bath and they say it's a bird bath and it's mounted high with feed, and it's deer mouth height. Like that's, nope, not that you're feeding the deer with that, but yeah.
do you
There's room
believe
to
that
be judicious in that.
this ordinance is broad enough
I
to
really
allow
don't
us
think she would.
interpretive?
I think the ordinance, again, I think it's broad enough to solve the problem that we face to some extent. It provides some remedial relief from the deer problem, but you're never gonna be able to come up with something that fits every single situation.
Were you able to discover how many
Yeah.
citations?
Yeah. So, my information is that, one of the ordinances and one of the solicitors' experience in Forest Hills this was pretty much the ordinance they have. They've received no complaints and they've had no enforcement. And theirs was adopted a little over a year ago. And the other people we checked with were, McCandless, town of McCandless, and Marshall Township. And, yeah, I think that was primarily it. Also, I didn't get responses back from their solicitors, but the only one I did hear from was Forest Hills, and he told me they had no complaints and no enforcement.
Okay. Good enough?
Yeah, I really wanted that kind of clarified for
Good.
some people that were
No,
concerned.
it's a good point.
No, it's definitely a good point. In fact, that was one of the things that caused, I think it was Marshall or McCandless, to actually put something in, like you're talking about, because somebody had a bird feeder and wanted that covered in the ordinance, and they did. But then they set up a whole mechanism for appealing from decisions to go to the commissioners. And I don't think that you want to be saddled with a bird feeder issue coming before you on an adjudicated basis. I think that would really be burdensome for the commissioners.
If I as a resident see what I think is a violation and I report it, what's the procedure for reporting? Pictures, phone call?
You can call,
Letter?
you would call Gwen, and you could take pictures like anybody if you see a violation. Actually, Jeff would go out and do his own
Okay.
investigation, and Jeff would see what he could see. He'd go out and visit the property like he normally does. And like I said, that usually our first step is Jeff has a conversation if he observes a violation with the resident.
Good. Any further discussion?
If you would like to proceed with this, it won't be on the agenda for next week because it hasn't been advertised because it's a draft. So would you like to proceed with enacting this?
Yes, as long as Commissioner Dara has a chance, because he was very interested in this.
Okay. So I can put it on unfinished business for next week just to see if he has anything, or just check with him myself.
Yeah, I think it's in the packet that you emailed, so he can read it.
If you want to proceed, then I'll advertise it to be adopted at the January legislative meeting.
Good enough. New business, 2023 meeting dates.
Before we leave that, one last thing, I would emphasize, I made some general comments about intent, but I would emphasize the very beginning of this, the first sentence, states no person shall knowingly, purposely, or intentionally feed deer.
Good.
So I think that also addresses your
Yeah,
concern,
covers
I
bird
agree.
feed and the bird feeder.
I
very
agree.
specifically.
I agree.
Okay, I'm done.
2023 meeting dates?
The meeting dates are published for the workshop and the legislative. They generally follow the same schedule. The workshops will be the second Monday of the month, and the legislative will be the third Monday of the month. The exception being March, where we meet on Tuesday for the legislative meeting. And I don't think we had any other holiday bumps, like everything else, our meetings are okay with that.
Is it time to reconsider a Masonic meeting and a fire hall meeting?
I think, later in 2023, we usually did those in the fall, so we could pursue setting that up
Mr.
again.
Haluka, are we safe?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's
Especially Masonic now, because their vaccination rate is extreme.
reenact that.
That's good.
Okay, so that'll be in the, we'll work on it, and usually, I think it was a September meeting at Masonic and an October or November meeting at the fire station if they'll have us back.
There's no action required, right?
No. And they're posted on the calendar. They will be on the 2023 calendar on the website, so anybody can look up and see what date the meeting.
Okay, MS4 waiver.
This is a stormwater regulation program from the DEP, and 5 years ago, we received a waiver for some of the requirements because we are small, we are not directly, we don't have a clearly direct discharge into the Ohio River, so we met the requirements to get a waiver of this permitting process, and then we just resubmitted and received another waiver. However, we still do a lot of the things that are part of that program. So we are still maintaining the cleaning of the catch basins and the repairing and proceeding in parts of it like we don't have the waiver, just so that we are ready to go if the waiver ever disappears. So we're just gonna keep doing what we're doing, but we don't have to file all these forms.
And on that general subject, it's time to send PennDOT a second letter on Deer Run to make sure they know that we're intending to protect their asset.
I can do that.
Good.
I would be happy to draft something.
Does that need any explanation, Gwen? Okay, Amazon Canopy Land Development Application.
The planning commission met last week. We did not have a quorum, but we managed to have a meeting that accomplished a lot of the engineering conversation that needed to happen. The Amazon Canopy project is almost there. They had a few requirements that they needed to meet in order to get a clean engineering review letter. We are waiting to hear from them if they're going to be able to accomplish that in this week in order to be on your agenda next week for a vote. To be able to do that, they have to get the things completed in time, get HRG review letter, and we have to convene a special meeting of the planning commission to hold a vote recommending approval. So I'm not sure if all three of those things are gonna happen in the next 4 days. I'll keep you posted. It may be, if they knock everything out, then it may be on your agenda for approval next week, and then if not, it's gonna go to the January meetings.
Okey-doke. Holiday office closures.
Just wanted to keep everyone informed that we will be closed Friday, December 23rd and Monday, December 26th. And then again on Friday, December 30th and Monday, January 2nd.
Is that posted?
It'll be posted, it'll be on the calendar on the website, and we'll probably
And the
post the
door.
door, yes.
Did we receive any citizen communications?
No.
So we have one citizen that also holds the role as commissioner that we are so happy to have back.
Happy to be back. Thank you
You
very
go,
much.
girl.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Very, very happy. So,
I would
And
imagine.
by the way, you look great.
thank you, thank you.
Is there any additional executive session required? Any comments about next week? The format? No. Okay, any other new business? Meeting adjourned.
Okay, before everybody adjourns,
What we just did.
no, before everybody leaves.